that we are terrible at feedback. We are terrible at having candor around how we're performing or what the issues are. So when we realized that, we went through basically an entire redo of what we called our feedback movement, and did special training on it, trained people that are mentors and performance advisors. We went through special training with them and really enhanced our ability to give timely and I would say feedback that is receptive to the person receiving it, because they knew that we cared about their progress.
All right, everybody, thank you for joining the Grow Rogue podcast. I'm Reade Milner, and today I'm joined by Joey Havens. I met Joey, actually, and I can't even say for certain that Joey met me, but in a funny coincidence, early in my career, I was a social media marketing specialist for another marketing agency in Atlanta, and Joey's firm was our client, and it was my job to be Mr. Havens on social media. So in a weird way, I was Joey. And so we reconnected, and I had always been an admirer of his work, and so I'm excited to have him on the show. Joey, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure, Reade. I really appreciate this opportunity, and it's so exciting for us to connect again.
Yes, sir. Well, I mentioned in the intro that I've always been, ever since those days that we first became familiar with each other, I've been a great admirer of your work as a leader, and specifically your insistence on solving people problems ahead of business problems. Do you mind giving us a quick background on what led to you developing that leadership style and why you think that is so important?
Well, Reade, first, I appreciate those kind comments. And I think if I really think about what was the catalyst of that, it's two things. One is I came up as a professional and trained as an accountant and passed my CPA. You know, I was very competitive. I come up through sports. I was very competitive. And so as I began to move up a little in leadership, I wasn't known as the most friendly person to work for. I started hitting some roadblocks. So part of that was just I went down the wrong road in a competitive manner, didn't really understand the power of a team. And the second part is just my roots. I was raised in North Mississippi in a Christian family. My upbringing was one where we were taught to care and value each and every person that God places in our life. And so as I migrated back to more of what mom and dad had taught me, to my own personal faith, to my own experience with failing in growing, very high performance, effective teams, I said, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Joey, when you use that phrase, I think that's something that's so common among leaders, founders, people of influence, when they discover that there's, quote, got to be a better way. It's almost like that is the catalyst for making a change in their own lives and then making sure that change affects others. Can you talk about where you went from there, right? Once you said there's got to be a better way, what was the next step in the solving of that particular problem?
Well, actually, probably the biggest jump in the way I was able to make that transition a lot quicker than it happens sometimes in people's lives is I actually hired a personal coach. As I engaged with him, as he held that mirror up for me and helped me see how, one, I was too competitive. I was not clear in my communications. I learned about fuzzy agreements, and I began to allow him to work more with our team. I started to get to trust the team more to give me feedback, to ask for feedback. As you move up in leadership, you get less and less feedback. People are more hesitant to tell you what you really need to hear. And we all develop blind spots. And so when I developed the confidence to just be vulnerable and trust the team to tell me what I needed to know, I began to progress a lot faster. The team began to grow a lot faster. And I really just learned a lot, but it took a personal coach really to help open my eyes. And I will say that to this day, one of the things that we implemented at Horn, where my career, spent most of my career, 39 years, one of the things I did when I became the managing partner is we put in a coaching program for our people because I knew how fast that could accelerate someone's growth, personal growth.
So talk about that a little bit. I've heard of certainly personal coaches, executive coaches. We've worked with a ton of them. But when you describe implementing a coaching process in a larger firm like that, how does that work? Describe that if you don't mind, or just explain that to us if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's we call them full potential coaches. That's one of the things that it's actually one of I've come to know that is one of my purposes in life is to help people see and realize their full potential. That's where I get real joy. And we call those coaches full potential coaches. They're certified coaches. And we experimented with it. We had to find our way. Not everybody's open to being coached. So we started at a certain level of the firm, a little higher level. The partner group, the ownership group, we had been doing coaches for years. So we got more involved with that. But then we started doing it at different levels of the firm. Anybody moving to be a supervisor of somebody else, that kind of things. At first, we made it mandatory. And then as we learned from that, we went to a voluntary program where people were invited to participate. And so we started with one certified coach and grew to 3 or 4. And everybody met with their coach once or twice a year and set up goals. And the coaches were available to help them understand feedback they were getting from their mentor. Because the coaches are not performance advisors. They're not mentors. They are simply full potential coaches to help you as an individual understand yourself, understand the feedback you're getting, and help you execute a plan to accomplish your dreams.
So we've talked a lot about on this show about the Pareto principle, right? And the fact that, and what to put it in this particular context, I'm imagining that there were a handful of issues, we'll call them, that popped up and probably represented 80% of the issues that most people deal with. What were some of those that those full potential coaches were helping with? And do you think that there's something that can be, we'll say, transplanted into our viewers and our listeners, that if they're dealing with those things, they can work on them in the same way that your full potential coaches helped your CPAs?
Absolutely. First, let me say this. The relationship between the individual and the coach was totally confidential. None of that was ever shared or reported to management in any way. So we protected that exclusively, even kept the coaching notes and everything else on separate servers away from anything that anybody in the firm could touch. So first, it was totally confidential program. But what we learned from that is the coaches would share with us the kinds of things they were solving, the kinds of observations they were making. The number one thing, and the one that I find today when I work with organizations, is that we are terrible at feedback. We are terrible at having candor around how we're performing or what the issues are. So when we realized that, we went through basically an entire redo of what we called our feedback movement and did special training on it, trained people that are mentors and performance advisors. We went through special training with them and really enhanced our ability to give timely and I would say feedback that is receptive to the person receiving it. because they knew that we cared about their progress, which is another aspect of that in this whole people thing. If leaders are not connected to their teams, if the team doesn't understand that they really care about their progress, they're not going to listen to that feedback.
Okay. So we're bad at taking feedback.
We're bad at giving it.
We're
That's
bad
what.
at, okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's both sides of it.
Yeah.
But what we did is we trained on the book by a professor, I believe, from Harvard. Thanks for the Feedback is the name of the book. And it teaches you how to receive feedback, even if it's given very poorly. All right. So, first of all, we resist somebody telling us, hey, you got something to work on. But if you understand the concepts behind how important, how valuable it is the most valuable thing you can get in your career. For leaders that want a high performance team, it's the most valuable thing you can get from your team is feedback. And so once we got that moving, we also trained the performance advisors how to be more timely with it, how to talk about what kind of feedback is this, how to match it with what are they doing right. And also it's very important to catch people doing the right thing and celebrate that.
Okay. So I'm going to ask a question, and I think this is going to be a great clip. And I'm going to ask both of those. Why do you think we're so bad at giving feedback?
Well, I mean, it always boils down to trust. It's our human nature, I think, to resist conflict. Some of us are more conflict avoidance than others. And the culture itself, the workplace culture itself, if it doesn't have a strong sense of belonging, if you in your marketing company, Reade, don't have a strong sense of belonging, you're not going to have enough confidence to receive feedback or to give feedback in a manner that's candid enough that it really does some good. So it's really two phases. One, do I have strong enough sense of belonging? And two, is the workplace culture strong enough that that's what the culture is about, that you have a strong culture where feedback is embraced and celebrated.
How do we develop a stronger sense of belonging? Because I ask that because that feels like a challenge that is rooted much more deeply than just one's work, right? If one has to find some deeper connection, how do we overcome that?
Well, that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, Leading with Significance, how to create a people first magnetic culture. And it always starts with leadership being intentional to really care and connect with people, to extend trust first. It's one of the things that I talk to leaders about. It's very important for you to be vulnerable enough to trust in the good in people. People don't come to work every day wanting to mess up. They want to succeed. But as leaders, we need to, one, demonstrate that we understand who they are, what they aspire, what's their goals. We need to connect to them, help them understand who we are, what we're about. So you've got to have that connection that builds with that trust. And once you extend trust, people begin to trust you in return. That's that kind of that magnetic energy that starts that sense of belonging. And people can have a strong sense of belonging with their immediate team and not have a strong sense of belonging with the organization. Because generally, most of that sense of belonging is going to be tied to their direct supervisor, who they directly report to.
All right, I want to connect this to what I'll call privately, and then we can cut this if you don't want this, but your new career, right? Where you're advising companies on these types of things. Am I understanding correct since your retirement?
Well, let's say I'm doing more retirement than I'm doing consulting, but my mission, I know this, and I'm still kind of figuring out where my sweet spot is, but my mission is just to share what I've learned and to help organizations, whether, just through everything from my social media to my weekly blog, where we talked about client referrals this week, but all about that leadership and how to help people see and realize their full potential. It's just about giving back in different ways, not necessarily building a full-time consulting business. I've worked full-time for over 40 years. Part of this is just giving back to a profession as well as a country and a world that has been very good to me. I've been very blessed, and I want to give back.
Well, I think that's fantastic. I love that. I love that approach, right, and that outlook on it. I'm curious. So let's say you are brought in, and let's say I'm the CEO of a firm. We'll call it, ABC company, and I tell you, look, I think the company culture is sick, right? Maybe I came in, maybe the guy before me messed it all up, but it's sick. We've got issues. There's no, we don't have that healthy feedback culture that you described. Where do we even start, right? Where do you even begin? Do you start bottom up, top down? Where do we go from where we are?
Yeah, again, been blessed, and that the last couple of years at Horn, I worked with companies on this specific thing and leadership teams and being more effective. And I'm actually doing a couple of engagements right now with companies that are doing exactly what you just asked me. So first of all, you're a parent, Reade, and probably a lot of your listeners are parents. And if I ask you if you were a good parent, you say absolutely. But at the same time, we all know deep down inside we fail our children in different ways. We have our own weaknesses. We scar our kids in different ways. Maybe we're too competitive. Maybe you push them too much on the ball field. Whatever it is, we all know that we're not perfect parents. And if you ask somebody about their company culture, especially if they're in the C-suite, the first thing they're going to tell you, and I've talked to thousands of them in my presentations where I allow them to rate their culture, they say, our culture's good, our culture's great, our culture's magnetic. But when you break that down and you start to get individual feedback in a confidential way that provides more candor, you begin to see there's a big trust gap between where the C-suite thinks they are and where members are having different experiences. And that's the key to it. You can have a lot of team members that are having a great experience, but you can have a lot of team members that are in the same location, working on the same team, that are having a bad experience. And so getting that feedback is extremely important, recognizing that good culture is not good enough today. And one of the things when we made, in 2011, we made culture, as I took over as managing partner, we made our culture our number one priority. And we told the entire firm that. You would have still, we had a lot of street creds that we were a good company to work for. But when we pulled the blind and we peeled the onion back and started looking at it, there were a lot of things that didn't smell very well. There were a lot of things that weren't working very well. To Reade, this is so critical. The reason we did that is because we were tired of having marginal growth. We were tired of not being able to grow exponentially and do that organically. And we just instinctively knew that was tied to people. It's always tied to people, whether you're using technology or not. And of course, we use technology everywhere today. It's tied to people. And we did not start growing faster than the profession. We didn't start growing faster than our competition until our culture started to move from good to great to magnetic. And I saw that to where we grew organically at numbers that were incredible. And the reason is that we could come up with a good marketing or business development strategy. We could put out great content, but if you don't represent what you're putting out, it actually works against you because you lose trust in the marketplace. But when your people are who you say they are, When they want to carry the flag, that's when they become raving cheerleaders, which turns to customers becoming raving cheerleaders.
All right. Well, now I'm going to selfishly pounce on this because we've found our Venn diagram, right? We've found the Venn diagram. I mean, I know that I instinctively know and also experientially know how important and how instrumental a good company culture is to growth. You talked about it. Obviously, I'm coming from the perspective of marketing and growth. And so if I may, how do we then, and this may just be part of discussion, right? You may not have an exact answer for this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. How do we then leverage that good company culture to grow organically in the way that you described? Or how did you, if that's how you guys were able to do that? And I'm thinking from a marketing perspective, but it may be a little less intentional than that from a marketing perspective as I'm hearing. But I'm curious to know your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's the magnetic energy part is all about discretionary effort and focus. And so people have a strong sense of belonging. They want to build something bigger than themselves. You lay out the marketing plan, the business development plan, the customer service plan. All of a sudden, people are leaning into that and helping make those things happen. And when clients or customers or prospects are responding to it, they're getting, somebody's answering the phone, or they're having a communication, a moment of truth that represents what they read or what they saw or what they heard about your company. And those moments of truth is what turns into organic growth. And the reason it's so important, if you're growing a lot organically, you're going to need more people. And so what you're back to, are your people helping recruit? Are your people helping grow? And when you get your culture to where it's magnetic, they're telling their friends, they're telling their cousins, they're telling everybody, you need to come to work where I work. We're doing great things. We're having fun. I have flexibility on when, where, and how I work. It's all of those things wrapped up into, I'm part of something that's building something bigger than myself. We all have that in our hearts. God created us to want to be part of something bigger than ourselves.
I certainly agree with that. And so I'm going to recap that, right? Because we're going to clip this. I want to recap that. Joey, what you're describing is essentially, I'm going to figure out how to use this in marketing-y terms, right? Because I love the language of the magnetic, right? You talk about, being a magnetic culture, a magnetic company. That turns every individual that's involved in the firm, both employees, team members, customers, into that magnet, right? They're making that larger and even more impactful because they're all wanting to tell the story. And if you've got that strong company culture, if you've got something that people really feel like they're a part of that is bigger than themselves and they're contributing to it, they have a strong sense of belonging to that, well, then you almost can't stop people from telling others about that. I mean, it spills out of them. Is that what you've seen? I mean, is that what you're describing?
Yeah, that's exactly what I experienced as we grew in that and learned more and more about it. And one of the key questions we would ask people as we would want to get feedback on how we were doing is, can you achieve your dreams here? Can you achieve what you want to do professionally here? And when we started out, that was less than 50% of the employees felt that way. The last time that I took that survey when I was involved, it was over 90% of the people had grown to the fact they said, yes, I can achieve my personal goals here. And see, that's connecting things. It's not all about the company. The company's going to benefit from that. But it goes back to, can they grow to who they want to be? And, there's several things that I try to bring out when I'm talking about culture, because people think they have a magnetic culture. They think they have a good culture or a great culture. A couple of things that we're talking about to kind of contrast the difference, it might help your audience understand the difference, is that when you have a magnetic culture, leaders trust first. When you have a good culture, trust is earned. Think about that a minute. It's a very different kind of environment, a very different culture.
Well, because what are you implying when you say that trust is earned? What you're implying is that we don't trust you, right? And
Right.
that,
How many
yeah,
times have you heard a supervisor, a leader, or somebody say, well, if you get this done, I'll trust you more. If you get this report out on time, I'll trust you to meet with the client next time. If you hit this sales goal, if you make these prospect calls, if you get this content done and it's out on time and Reade and them are able to post it for us, I'll trust you with the marketing plan. That's different from Reade. This is our marketing plan, and I trust you to execute on this. That doesn't mean you don't follow up, you don't make sure they have the resources and the guidance, but people know whether they're being trusted at the onset or whether they're having to earn that trust. And it's a big difference. When culture's magnetic, people will find a way. They'll find a way to execute. But when culture's good, they'll find excuses. There's always an excuse why that content wasn't ready. There's always an excuse why we missed the deadline for those social media posts.
well, I think it's, I often relate it. You started the conversation talking about sports, and so I'll pounce on that as well. I think about the difference often between playing to win and playing not to lose, right? When you're playing not to lose, you're tight. The excuses are what are filling your mind, right? Because you're thinking, if I don't do this, if I don't do this, if I can't do this, if this doesn't work. But when you're playing to win, those are far from your mind. When you're playing to win, you're loose. You can only do that when you believe that those that are in charge, maybe the coach or maybe your boss, trust you to get it done. So you can show up and be ready to go and do what needs to be done. I love how you say that people will find a way because they've taken it all in on they've taken that on themselves. They believe they can do it. They believe that others believe they can do it, which is the most powerful thing, in my opinion, that you can do for somebody is to make them believe that you believe in them. And I've always known the outcomes to be better when the team is playing to win versus just playing not to lose. So, well, I want to bring this to something that I think our viewers and our listeners can take some really, really actionable stuff from. Speaking of that Venn diagram, so you are a writer. You've been putting out content for as long as I've known you. Why do you think that has? What do you think the value has been for you in putting out that regular content, so you can get your thoughts out, you can get your message out to the world?
Well, if I'm completely honest, when I took over as managing partner, one of the problems I had was people knowing Joey and people trusting Joey. And so I started the blog. I have a weekly blog, Be Better blog. It comes out every Wednesday morning. And I've done that for over 10 years now. But I had to be pushed and prodded to do that initially. Joey, this is how people get to know you. This is how people begin to trust you. It was internal initially. And as I got better at it, we decided to turn that external. So I started posting it on all social media. Horn posted it. But it was a way for me to share some of my lessons and some of my mistakes, and I've got some really funny ones if you've read them over the years. But always relating those lessons, life lessons, to ways that we can be better leaders, be better people. And I'll tell you what I discovered, especially as I retired, the number of people who now read the blog, the number of people who text, write, email that have said this or that impacted their lives, it's just incredible. And I was blind to that. And I think that's one of the things that I talk to leaders about is be careful about keeping your actions aligned with who you say you are and who your company says they are. Because it affects people. Your voice travels down the hallway a lot further than you think. So that's really been the joy that has come to me, I don't get as much pleasure out of writing the stories as I do what I've seen, how it's impacted people.
Well, you've certainly been consistent and impactful in that consistency over the years. So thank you and congratulations on your retirement from Horn. And I know that I'm glad that you are continuing to serve the business community and the larger community through your work and through your experience. As a final wrap up to this, Joey, I want to make sure that those who need to get your message can get it. And so we're going to have links to your website, joeyhavens.com. It's going to be in the description of this video. If you're watching on YouTube, go check that out. Joey, what one parting message would you like to give to our viewers before the end of this episode?
I think the parting message would be two words that I've written in every book that I've signed, and that's be intentional. And if you're intentional and take actions, if you really do put people first, I can promise you, you'll have all the growth you need in your business. You'll have more personal growth, but you'll also have more bottom line growth when you get the people side of your business at a high performance level. So be intentional.
For everybody that's watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. If you liked this episode of the Grow Rogue podcast, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe and join us on the next one. See you soon.